Chapter 8. When the Jetta turned into the parking lot of 7-Eleven, James smiled. There was a nice isolated area behind the store, and it was getting dark. He drove his own car around back, then got out to watch the store entrance. When Phil came out with a bag, he sprang on him from behind. Phil yelled and fought, dropping the bag. It didn't matter. The sun had gone down and James's power was at full strength. He dragged Phil to the back of the store and put him facing the wall beside a dumpster, the classic police frisking position. "I'm going to let go now," he said. "Don't try to run away. That would be a mistake." Phil went tense and motionless at the sound of his voice. "I don't want to run away. I want to smash your face in, Rasmussen." "Go ahead and try," James was going to add, "make my night." But he reconsidered. He let go of Phil, who turned around and regarded him with utter loathing. "What's the matter? Run out of girls to jump?" he said, breathing hard. James gritted his teeth. Trading insults wasn't going to do any good, and he could already tell it was going to be hard to keep his temper. Phil had that effect on him. "I didn't bring you out here to fight. I brought you to ask you something. Do you care about Poppy?" Phil said, "I'll take stupid questions for 500, Alex," and loosened his shoulder as if getting ready for a punch. "Because if you do, you'll get her to talk to me. You were the one who convinced her not to see me, and now you're going to convince her that she has to see me." Phil looked around the parking lot as if calling for somebody to witness his insanity. James spoke slowly and clearly, enunciating each word. "There is something I can do to help her. Because you're Don Juan, right? You're going to heal her with your love." The words are flippant, but Phil's voice is shaky with sheer hatred. Not just hatred for James, but for a universe that would give Poppy cancer. "No, you've got it completely wrong. Look, you think I was making out with her, or trifling with her affections or whatever. That's not what was going on at all. I let you think that because I was tired of getting the 3rd degree from you, and because I didn't want you to know what we were doing." Sure, Phil said in a voice filled with equal measures of sarcasm and contempt. "So what were you doing? Drugs?" "This." James had learned something from his first encounter with Poppy in the hospital. Show and tell should be done in that order. This time he didn't say anything. He just grabbed Phil by the hair, jerked his head back. There was only a single light behind the store, but it was enough to give Phil a good view of the bared fangs looming over him. And it was more than enough for James, with his night vision, to see Philip's green eyes dilate as he stared. Philip yelled, then went limp. Not with fear, James knew. He wasn't a coward. With the shock of disbelief turning to belief. Philip swore. "You're right." James let him go. Phil almost lost his balance. He grabbed at the dumpster for support. "I don't believe it." "Yes, you do," James said. He hadn't retracted his fangs, and she knew that his eyes were shining silver. Phil had to believe it with James standing right in front of him. Phil apparently had the same idea. He was staring at James as if he wanted to look away, but couldn't. The colour had drained out of his face, and he kept swallowing as if he were going to be sick. "God," he said finally, "I knew there was something wrong with you. Weird wrong. I could never figure out why you gave me the creeps. So this is it." I disgust him, James realised. It's not just hatred anymore. He thinks I'm less than human. It didn't augur well for the rest of James's plan. "Now do you understand how I can help Poppy?" Phil shook his head slowly. He was leaning against the wall, one hand still on the dumpster. James felt his impatience rise in his chest. "Poppy has a disease. Vampires don't get diseases. Do you need a road map?" Philip's expression said he did. "If," James said through his teeth, "I exchange enough blood with Poppy to turn her into a vampire, she won't have cancer anymore. Every cell in her body will change, and she'll end up a perfect specimen, flawless, disease-free. She'll have powers that humans don't even dream of, and, incidentally, she'll be immortal. There was a long, long silence as James watched this sink in with Philip. Phil's thoughts were too jumbled and kaleidoscope for James to make anything out. But Phil's eyes got wider and his face more ashen. At last Phil said, "You can't do that to her." It was the way he said it. Not as if he were protesting an idea because it was too radical, too new. Not the knee-jerk reaction that Bobby had had. He said it with absolute conviction and utmost horror, as if James were threatening to steal Poppy's soul. "It's the only way to save her life," James said. Phil shook his head slowly again, eyes huge and trance-like. No, no, she wouldn't want that. Not at that cost. What cost? James was more than impatient now. He was defensive and exasperated. If he'd realised that this was going to turn into a philosophical debate, he would have picked somewhere less public. As it was, he had to keep all his senses on the alert for possible intruders. Phil let go of the dumpster and stood on his own 2 feet. There was fear mixed with the horror in his eyes, but he faced James squarely. "It's just, there are some things that humans think are more important than just staying alive," he said. "You'll find that out." "I don't believe this," James thought. He sounds like a genius space captain talking to the alien invaders in a B-movie. "You won't find Earth people quite the easy mark you imagine." Aloud he said, "Are you nuts? Look, Phil, I was born in San Francisco. I'm not some bug-eyed monster from Alpha Centauri. I eat Wheaties for breakfast." "And what do you eat for a midnight snack?" Phil asked, his green eyes somber and almost childlike. "Or are the fangs just for decoration?" "Walked right into that one," James's brain told him. He looked away. "Okay, touché. There are some differences. I never said I was a human, but I'm not some kind of... If you're not a monster, then I don't know what is." "Don't kill him," James counselled himself frantically. You have to convince him. "Phil, we're not like what you see at the movies. We're not all powerful. We can't dematerialize through walls or travel through time, and we don't need to kill to feed. We're not evil, at least not all of us. We're not damned." "You're a natural," Philip said softly, and James could feel that he meant it from his heart. "You're wrong. You shouldn't exist. Because we're higher up on the food chain than you? Because people weren't meant to feed on other people?" James didn't say that his people didn't think of Philip's people as people. He said, "We only do what we have to do to survive, and Poppy's already agreed." Philip froze. "No, she wouldn't want to become like you. She wants to stay alive, or at least she did, before she got mad at me. Now she's just irrational because she hasn't got enough of my blood in her to finish changing her, thanks to you." He paused, then said deliberately, "Have you ever seen a 3-week-old corpse, Phil? Because that's what she's going to become if I don't get to her." Phil's face twisted. He whirled around and slammed a fist into the metal side of the dumpster. "Don't you think I know that? I've been living with that since Monday night." James stood still, heart pounding, feeling the anguish Phil was giving off and the pain of Phil's injured hand.